Hi, today we have a 7.3 Powerstroke that's it will start. It's very hard to start, has absolutely no power. On its own, we can't get it to move. What I want to show you is a way to diagnose this one. I suspect the injector wiring harness, under valve cover harness became disconnected, and some of the things you can look for depending on what type of scanner you have. I'll show you two different ways to do this. Of course, I will use the Ford scanner because that makes it easier. It makes it better, makes it easier for me to show you what's going on. The customer called up. He told us he had the P1316 code, which tells me it's an IDM, the injected driver module code. Now, this is one of Ford's first multiplexing vehicles where the modules talk to each other. So to get the IDM codes out of the injected driver module code, or to find out what the 1316 code is telling it, we need to have a bi-directional scanner that can communicate and pull the codes out of it. Because the 1316 code only means that the codes need to be retrieved from the IDM. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with the scanner right now. Since we've already had the P1316 code, what I want to try to do is narrow it down to see what the IDM is trying to do. Okay, with the NGS scanner, I'm going to do a key on, engine off, injector electrical self test. Some other people would call it a buzz test. The reason why we call it a buzz test is because it electronically cycles, it turns on and off the injector solenoids, and you'll hear that here in a second. So I'm going to activate it. One of the things what you're going to be hearing, at first it's going to do all 8 injectors. You hear them all going, you hear the multiple cycling, and then you're going to hear them individually, and it does it in numerical order. 1, 2, 3, so on, all the way up to 8. So I usually count them out in my head, and you want them to be nice and sharp and crisp. You want nice snaps out of them. That tells me I've got an injector that's not binding, not sticking, moves freely, and that's a good injector. If you hear what I describe as it's muffled, like somebody's got it underneath a pillow or you got your hands cupped over it, that's either low voltage or it's a sticking binding injector. So we'll do this one here. That's all of them cycling. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So from that we can tell that we have a problem with the left bank. The passenger side bank, the way I remember it, is the passenger is odd. You have 1, 3, 5, 7 on the passenger side. On the driver's side, you have 2, 4, 6, 8. And when we activated these, you can hear 2, 4, 6, and 8, how they were silent. That tells me I have either 4 injectors sticking, which is not common, or I have a connection problem, which is the most common. It could be an IDM. Almost always it's a connection problem, that the connector's falling out underneath the valve cover, or we have the IDM failed or it's getting spiked from the glow plugs. I'm going to need to pull the valve cover off and show you that. But before I do that, I want to try one other thing, just because most people at home do not have a scanner that has bi-directional controls. If you get the P1316 code and your truck, as it starts, you hear a sound like this. It's starting on 4 cylinders, so we know we've got a problem. This is the sound that's common, and also another way to get around this. What you have on that, you hear it's flaring up and down. The IPR is trying to keep the engine running. The IPR is the injection pressure regulator. It gets the pressure high, the motor responds, then it cuts it down. But it can't do it because we only have 4 cylinders contributing. It's hard for it to keep running. Now, at home, another thing that you may or may not have, this is from Harbor Freight. If you guys have these, they're only about 40, 50 bucks, so this is inexpensive to use to diagnose it, a lot cheaper than a scanner. Or you can even take a crayon. If your kids have crayon or a candle, you can take that and you can lay a piece of wax or a crayon on top of each exhaust. I'm telling you this so in case you don't know which side it is. We're going back to where we know how it runs, but we don't have a way to pull the injected driver code module codes out. Anyhow, you can take the crayon, the wax, you can put a piece on top of each exhaust manifold, try to keep it running for a few minutes, and see which exhaust manifold ports are hot and which ones stayed cooled. Obviously the ones that stayed cooled are the ones that has the power issue. But with this temperature gun, I'm going to try to diagnose it this way. As I go across it, it's still active. I'm getting an average 83, 84 degrees across my exhaust. So this side, it's not working. Over here, it's varying between 117, 121 along all the different exhaust ports. So there is a way for the average guy at home to diagnose this with, if you just have a cheap scanner, you go borrow one from the auto parts store, you get the 1316, you know, I need to investigate it further, you can do the crayon, the wax trick, or you can get a temperature gun, and you can try it out that way. So let me get this valve cover off, and we'll find out what's actually going on in the valve cover, and I'll show you that. One of the things I want to tell you about on this side, when you pull the valve cover off, well, a couple things. One, when you take the charge air cooler hose off, always take them loose at the component side. What I mean by the component, you want to take them loose at the turbo and at the charge air cooler or your intercooler, whatever you want to call it. Don't take it loose at the aluminum hose. If you do, you have a chance of over tightening it, collapsing your hose, and then you have other issues. So you're best off undoing your clamps at the component side, the turbo, charge air cooler. Also, when you do this valve cover, you'll see that there's a bolt that looks hidden from the crankcase ventilation. Use a closed-end wrench and take that bolt out. Do not remove the two screws that takes the crankcase ventilation off the top, because if you do, there's O-rings underneath that will swell up, and now you're going to have to go buy some new O-rings. If you just use a box-end wrench, crack it loose, remove it, and the same way with tightening it, you just saved yourself some money and a trip to the parts store. Anyhow, let's get it apart. Okay, what I was talking about before earlier was this is the crankcase ventilation. This is where all your vapors rises up and gets drafted into your air intake. The bolt that I was referring to, it's normally your valve cover is installed like this. The bolt that I'm referring to is here. So if you just use a box end wrench, break it loose, use your fingers and get it off, you're a lot better off. Because if you remove here, every time back when I used to do that, I've always found the O-rings to be oil impregnated and they're swollen up and they don't want to go back on. So then you had the expense and the waste of time having to go downtown where you just grab the box end wrench. You don't have to do that. Okay, now what we're looking for here is the connection underneath the valve cover and having problems with that. This connection, here's your upper one, you can see the 10 pin, and the lower one. We should not have this gap right here. Even though it would be easy just to push it back up right now, you don't want to do that because you may have burnt ends from the high resistance. So I usually pull it back, I look at my ends here, I check them, these look nice. You'll know. The connectors here, the end connectors with the larger terminals, those are your glow plugs. Larger terminals, larger load, more current, your glow plugs take that. If we had high resistance or a glow plug caused it, you'll see arcing or signs of it burning across, usually from your glow plugs to your to the other ones that's in your injectors. So anyhow, we're going to connect this back up, and one of the things I like to do here is originally back in the 90s I published a thing called Fix Your Truck for a Quarter back on diesel stock. This is back before Ford was making a wedge. I found that through fatigue and time with this pointing down and the way a diesel motor vibrates, that this with the fatigue it no longer grips. It can come out, and that's what happened on this truck. We don't have the connection to the injectors. So even pushing it back up, this needs to be clipped up there. There's a little clasp on top there and it fails. So what I've done is I take a quarter and right about through George's head, just like you're giving him a buzz cut, I'll take my tin snips and I'll cut it off. And the reason why I do this, you have to cut it off for the valve cover to seat. As I install it, I'll explain it to make more sense. Anyhow, you can see the quarter where it's cut at, and this is the perfect thickness, the perfect diameter. You can, if you have a problem with defacing money, go find a washer. There's other ways to do it, and you can install that. Anyhow, back to the quarter trick. Fix your truck for a quarter. What I do is I'll install it here. You may find some of your 2002, 2003 models, if you try to do this as preventive maintenance, it doesn't work because they have a built-in, more like a leg that keeps it up. So On the newer ones, if you can't get your quarter in there, it's just because it has the updated harness and connector on it. But anyhow, with the quarter in here, you see the way it's saddled in here, it's not going to fall down. Also with the ends here, it can't fall out. This is not going to ever fall into your engine. It's not going to be a problem. And also your valve cover seats across here, so you have to have the head cut off so your valve cover still has a surface area so it can seat. Anyhow, let's get the valve cover back on this one, start it up, and see what it sounds like. Okay, we've got the valve cover back on. We're all ready to test it out and see how it does now. Hopefully we'll have it without a misfire or any other issues. And here we have it. The truck's fixed for a quarter. Well, unless you see the repair order, then it's a little more than that.